Okay. Hi, I'm Sarithkin. I'm up in Ontier, and tonight I am talking with Duke Alden of Wolverton of the West,
Hey guys.
who has been King of the West 4 times. Um, and he is Duke number 13 of my quest, and I was supposed to fight 50 Dukes, but I am interviewing them instead since nobody can travel and fight right now. So usually we just start with an origin story. So if you could tell me how and where and when you found the SCA, that would be great.
Okay. A friend of mine, a guy named Eric Firediver, and he about 30, it was back in 1990, I guess. He asked me if I wanted to go to a camping event, and I happened to be driving the direction that the camping event was, and so I went there on the promise of beer and fires, and I saw the fighting and just was hooked. And from there on, it was part of my life.
How long did it take you to get your own armor?
You know, it didn't take all that long. The guy that ended up knighting me, or the guy that ended up squiring me, rather, he was at a local fighter practice that I had heard about. So I went to it and climbed into his incredibly just disgusting, sweaty, nasty armor here in the middle of the Central Valley of California. It's, still like 100 degrees at night fighting, and just miserable. Climbed into his armor, and he decided that showed that I was probably dedicated enough, if I was willing to climb into his gross stuff, to actually do the game. And after that, I borrowed a helmet from him, and then this was back in the days of carpet armor. So a friend of mine and I made carpet armor and borrowed and made a few pieces here and there. We actually used like high impact plastic that we made for like leg armor and arm armor, and it would last for like 1 or 2 practices and then crack and have to be remade. And there was a lot of dedication and a lot of duct tape used in the very beginning of it.
Wow. that would be a lot of work to have to make your armor every 2 weeks.
Well, going back to 1990, there just wasn't that much for sale. And what was for sale was certainly not the quality or the variety that we have now. We live in a wonderful time for being able to buy armor, I think.
Yeah. What did you do about a helmet?
I borrowed one from a friend, and then I ended up buying just the top part of the helmet and made a kind of a funky sporting Soleil at one point.
Cool. So who was the guy that you eventually squired to?
Ragnar Beowulf. He's an earl here in the West Kingdom. He reigned. It was pretty neat. I won my first crown in like 95, I guess, but I had just had 2 kids. They were both very little. And so I took about 10 years off and didn't fight tournaments, at least to try to win. And, go in and fight with daggers or something to give your opponent the very best fight that you could give them, but limit yourself hopefully to the point that you didn't reign when it wasn't convenient life-wise. And so then when I did fight again, I won, and then he won the crown right after me. So the guy that was my knight ended up being able to make me a duke, which was pretty cool.
That is super cool.
Yeah.
So how long were you squired to him?
I think I was squired for about 3 years. I got knighted pretty quickly because I was fighting a lot.
Define a lot.
3 fighter practices, and then try to hit an event, and then Sundays there was generally a fighter practice as well, an amazing training fighter practice that I got super lucky and got into. So I was fighting 4 and 5 times a week.
Cool. Do you believe in pell work?
I do believe in pell work. I don't think I've probably utilized it to the extent that it could be utilized. I've got a lot of really good ideas, but they came kind of late in my career when I was didn't really have the drive. I was certainly not fighting 4 and 5 times a week. I was fighting, maybe twice a month at that point instead. And so when I got all these great ideas, I never really implemented them. I think it's probably a very valuable tool, and it's one that I haven't used enough.
Okay. So your main weapon form, sword and shield?
Sword and shield is what I really love. I've played with some mass weapons, and I played with spears in wars, but sword and shield is really my bread and butter. I feel that there is still, after playing with that weapon format for over 30 years, I still feel that there's just so much to learn to it. And so instead of spreading around and being okay at a bunch of things, I've really tried to play that game as much as I could.
And did you always fight with a center mount shield?
No, I've won crowns I don't think I've doubled up and won a crown with the same type of shield twice. I've had side strap shields, square ones, bunny round, and then I fought with a kite shield that was center strapped, and I fought with like I think maybe a smaller center strapped kite as well at one point.
And what was the reasoning for switching around on shields? Just to keep it interesting, or?
Largely to keep it interesting. When I went to the kite shield, I did that just to try to maybe get a little more authenticity. I was trying to go for kind of a Bayeux tapestry look, and so I went with that shield for historical purposes.
And did you have a persona?
Ish.
I've heard the West isn't all that big on personas.
Not super big. I don't think for as much as other kingdoms when I've encountered other places. I mean, like probably 11th century Saxon, but not really much more specific than that.
So it was more about keeping your armor in a cohesive period and culture.
Yeah, I started fighting just because I loved the combat, the physicality of the game. At that point, I don't know of many other games that were out there where you could, especially for an average sized person like me. I mean, I'm 5'10" and weigh 200 pounds. So I can pretty much fight as hard as I want to, or as hard as I physically can, and I can't really hurt someone. And generally, you know, that kind of power level is unnecessary. But, you know, there are times in wars where you can just get up and be pushing on another line and literally just going full out physically as much as you can possibly pour into it, and no one gets hurt and everyone has fun. So initially that's what I really liked, but then after getting into the game and associating with some friends that knew a lot more about history, that stuff kind of rubs off, I think. And my experience has been the more you learn about history, the more you enjoy history, and it makes it easier to learn even more. So I think that the persona thing happened, and the more being more interested in authenticity happened is just with playing the game for some years.
And when did you get knighted?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up to know exactly, but I'm guessing 93. I started in 90, and it was just a little over 3 years.
Did you have a vigil?
I did have a vigil.
And what was your best vigil advice? Do you remember?
No.
That
was almost 30 years ago at this point, so I'm lucky if I remember last week.
So you won crown like 2 years after you were knighted, basically.
Sounds right, yeah. My big goal was I wanted to be knighted within 3 years, and I wanted to be king within 5. And that was, I think, a very optimistic goal at the beginning. And I think it took me 5.5 to be king. So I missed it a little bit, but I was still pretty happy with that.
How did your training change after you got knighted, when you decided that you were going to go for your crown within 2 more years?
No, not really, because I had made that goal early on. And when I started, I was 23 years old or something, and single. So obviously, I was unencumbered by family and kids and stuff, and so I had as much free time as I wanted to pour into the game. And at that point, I just decided that I loved it, and I really don't like being bad at things. And so if I'm going to do something, I'm either going to do it full out or not. And at that point, I decided I wanted to be excellent at the game, and tried to do that. I got really lucky. There's a gentleman that has trained a lot of our local dukes, and then he moved up to Idaho, I think, and he's trained some dukes up there. Sagan, yeah. I got super lucky, and about a year into my fighting, I got paired up with Sagan because my knight was training with Sagan. And I was kind of an experiment at the time. Sagan, at that point, was taking probably knight quality fighters and trying to bring them up higher. And I was an experiment with him to see if he could reach down a little bit lower in the barrel and bring someone up to, knight quality, and then higher from there. But he wanted to see how solid of a fighting base I think someone needed to have before they could really benefit from his training style. And I think it was a success. I progressed pretty quickly and gained just so much base knowledge to build off of over the years.
Was he the one running the Sunday practice that you talked about?
Yeah, he was the Sunday practice guy.
I've trained with him a little bit. He's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah, just great eye and great mind for fighting.
He really does. Did you? I guess I'm sort of getting ahead of myself, but did you have squires of your own?
I have had 3 squires overall. One of them doesn't play the game anymore. One of them had to stop fighting because he was a tap dancer when he was young. And I guess that's really hard on your knees. And so his knees were kind of destroyed and had to walk away from the game because of that. And then I was successful in bringing one of my squires to knighthood.
Who is that?
Daniel de Aquitaine. He's a viscount here in our kingdom.
Yeah. And you live in Sinagua, right?
I do.
You said heat, and I'm like, it must be Sinagua and not the Mist.
Yeah, Sacramento. So we're right here in the Central Valley. It was 99 today, I think.
Ouch. Okay. So following like Sagan's training methodology, he does a lot of drills and a lot of, throw as you block and block as you throw and all of that kind of stuff. Did he work with you on the mental part of the game as well, or?
Yeah, the mental part of the game was a big part of it. I don't know if he still does it anymore because it's been over 20 years since he moved out of the area, and I haven't trained with him for a long time. I see him periodically and chat with him on Facebook, but I haven't trained with him for a long time. But the way that we started every fighter practice on Sundays was that we would sit down and go through kind of a meditation practice. I think it comes from his Asian martial arts background, and he would take us through kind of a centering and focusing drill for maybe 10 minutes or so with your eyes closed and focusing on your breathing and kind of trying to walk it down to where you start acknowledging all the sounds around you and then start kind of getting rid of all those sounds to where all of your focus is just completely on what you're doing. And so that was probably the biggest mental part of the game that he did. And I found that to be hugely beneficial. I've used it not only in winning some of my early tournaments, kind of stepping aside and trying to get my brain back into the game, but I have also used it at like 70 feet underwater down in Cancun when I kind of panicked at one point scuba diving and did center focusing, literally floating at 70 feet water, and might have saved me from getting the bends. So it's been his mental aspect, I think, was some of the most valuable stuff I learned from him.
Before you won Crown, did you final in Crown?
I think so. No, I didn't final in Crown. I think I'd been to semifinals in Crown. I think I won Crown the first time I was in finals.
Do you have like a tourney day ritual?
Not so much a tourney day ritual. A friend of mine and we started trying to use our pseudo medical science in terms of making your body work better, and we started carb loading the night before. So we'd go out and have like a giant pasta dinner with the theory that would give you some long-term energy, and that's probably the closest thing that I have to a ritual.
And what,
going out for a pasta dinner is not that bad too.
No. It's a fun ritual,
right?
Yeah. What role does your consort have on tourney day for you? I
don't know, but I've been married twice. I'm currently married to my lovely wife, Duchess Constantina von Ravenna. Was married before that to a woman that was only kind of peripherally into the SCA. And so I spent my first 10 years or so in the SCA without having a consort around very much. She went to some of the tournaments with me, but like the first coronet tournament that I went to that I finaled in, she wasn't even there. And so I had to call her up and say, hey, I'm going into finals now. Wish me luck. So I went for a very long time without having a consort. Constantina and I have a very different thing because I met her in the game. And so she was much more involved and invested in it. And so it's certainly different from that now. But I think for so long, I just got into having to be on my own mentally that the consort, I'm certainly aware that she's there. We salute, we talk, and she supports me. And, if any little things, so I need water or food or something, she's obviously super good on that side of things. But I think I got so into just kind of being on my own mentally that most of the game is in my head. I don't know if I answered that properly, but
no, you did. I think that's fair.
But I mean, especially after I won my first crown and kind of achieved a goal that I had set for myself. Fighting for her / with her is the only reason I do it. I wouldn't just do it for myself anymore. So I don't want to minimize her impact or her import in the game for me.
Definitely. What was your favorite part about reining the first time you reigned?
Boy, probably, okay, so I got lucky and was the king at the 30-year celebration.
Oh, that's cool.
And so being able to go up to Ontario, up to the fairgrounds up there and be royalty was a pretty neat experience. Going into the grand court, and of course they go by OP, so going in first, and there were some wonderful Ontarian people that like loaned me a huge hawk that I got to go into court with, a big hawk on my arm, and that was pretty cool. I went and played did some equestrian riding, and I took in retrospect, I should not have done this, but I took the big Western crown, the big silver crown, and we looped it onto a camel. And I got to ride looking like I was, what was it, Longshanks and Braveheart. Looked kind of like that. And oh my God, I hit this horse and it broke into a gallop in that giant arena there. And that horse just broke into this gallop that was so smooth, just flying down that area. Oh, not that just memories that I'll never ever forget. Pretty magical.
That is super magical.
Yeah.
So before we went live, I was talking to you a little bit about being Knight's Counselor, and you were, I don't know if it's a dozen, but it was at least 8 that I counted. You were Knight's Counselor for a whole bunch of guards. Can you explain what the Knight's Counselor is? Well,
so the Knight's Counselor is a role that is appointed by the Queen for the Queen's Guard in our kingdom anyway, and it's a person that's supposed to be an advisor, kind of almost a secondary knight to the younger fighters that are on the Queen's Guard. Someone that they can come and talk to and ask questions to, that's outside of probably their family or their insular unit that they're around all the time, so that they can kind of get a different idea on their path to knighthood. If they're on the Queen's Guard, theoretically they should be, somewhat close, or at least on the right path, and having someone that is specifically right there for the purpose of being able to answer any questions that they might have, I think is probably the biggest role.
So were there certain things that you would do all the time for that? Like, would you do sort of education on the different chivalric virtues, or?
It varies depending on how much the Queen wanted you to be involved in things. And so on some of them, it was more of a, hey, I'm here if you need me, feel free to come and chat with me. Introduce ourselves and sit around and chat at the beginning of the reign. But not just there as a resource if needed. Other reigns was very involved with like projects and quests and tasks that they had to perform. So I think it varied depending on the personality and desires of the Queen.
Okay. As you grew through the SCA, how did your view on the role of knighthood change, if at all?
I'm not sure that it changed very much. I think it's been pretty consistent for me for the whole time. Looking up at knights and trying to think of what I expected of them in terms of behavior and skill and advice and everything. I think I'm pretty much in the same boat that I was back when I started.
Cool. And then you took well, you didn't take a break, but you raised some kids, and then you reigned again like 10 years after your first reign. Is that right?
That's correct.
While you weren't really going for crown, how did you keep yourself motivated, or is it just because fighting's fun?
Yeah, I just love fighting. Yeah. I still kept going to fighter practice. I still kept going to wars. So there's quite a bit of time in armor still. And I still fought in tournaments. I just went out and tried to handicap myself to the point that I could go out and give my opponent the very best possible fight that I could with the weapon style that I chose. A couple of times that came came close to kind of biting me in the rear because I would fight in like our cornet tournaments, and I ended up being in finals and semifinals a couple times, fighting with, like dual axes, hand axes, and kind of weird small buckler and an axe, or something something that's certainly not my bread and butter go to, and figured I was handicapping myself enough and got a little too close. But I tried to keep playing the games just because I really love war. I've got a great group of brothers that I have fought with for many, 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 many years now. And I love war, but I don't think that for me that there's anything like that one-on-one competition, especially in later rounds when you're fighting, real high quality opponents, and that mental chess game that goes on between two individuals. There's nothing like that in the world for me. And so while I tried not to win for that time while my children were young, I still played in the tournaments, just handicapping myself. So it wasn't that big of a difference, other than trying to make it to where I didn't end up having the responsibility and the financial impact of winning.
So when you decided to win again, was there not a lot of ramp up since you had been?
Yeah, it didn't take much ramp up at all. It was actually relatively close after I was divorced from my first wife, and then Constantina and I got together. We fought maybe 3 or 4 months after we got together, and that's I think a good test for a relationship. If you can have a new relationship and successfully make it through a reign, I think you're probably going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So did you just go back to Sword and Shield then when you decided you wanted to be competitive?
Yeah. And mostly I fought, that's pretty much what I've fought my whole career, is just Sword and Shield. I would just pick up the funky weapons or different weapons, to knowing that since I hadn't trained with them for years and years and years, that I probably wasn't going to be able to be the threat for, the top 10% of the contestants anyway in the game.
You talked about your brothers that you fight in war with. Which band are you with?
So we're not like just technically a war group. It's the Fellowship of the Argent Angel.
That's what I thought.
We've got some really good guys in that group. The SCA has been really fortunate for me. I don't know if you've noticed a pattern, but I met my wife in the game. I've met all of my best friends in the game. My business evolved out of the game. I don't know. I really credit with the SCA and the good people in it with pretty much everything positive in my life. That sounds like, I don't know, maybe a little melodramatic, but it's true.
I met my husband in the game, and all my best friends are in the game, so I get it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So the Argent Angels are a really interesting group. You have some amazing people in that group. Do you guys have some sort of code or I don't know, like a code of ethics or anything for your group?
We have a charter that we put together when we started, and I think it defines probably a lot of what you're talking about.
What is your charter?
Oh, well, I don't have it memorized.
It's all right.
It's pretty long.
Okay.
One of my friends has it memorized because he quotes it every year or recites it every year at our anniversary meeting, where we sit down and to consider new members and talk about what we're going to be doing and what we have done well and what we have failed at.
So is it a group of like-minded knights
that phrase is actually in the charter?
I can write your charter for you.
I don't think it says like-minded knights. I think it says like-minded individuals.
Okay.
Because when we started, there were a handful of us that weren't knighted yet. But yeah, that phrase is in there specifically.
Okay. And is it a group that sort of strives to meet certain ideals and set an example? Yeah,
definitely. Both of those. Everything from trying to set a good example, on the battlefield, to we try to. One of the things is and I'll paraphrase it poorly probably, but is that we try to also help with the fight against time in terms of like historic sites, and so we have multiple times raised money to send to Cartmel Priory in England, which was a priory that William Marshall founded. And so we send them, $500 or $3,000 from events that we run and fundraisers that we have done. So we send them money. It's pretty neat. One year we were just above, in terms of how much was donated, we were just above the Grand Duke of Luxembourg. So we felt pretty good about that.
That's really that's a really neat thing to do. Cool.
Yeah, I don't want to overblow it. It's not like we're the ones keeping that priory functional, but we've helped a little bit.
But it's something that you are contributing to outside of the SCA using your brotherhood.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Okay, and then you also have been the recipient of the Wreath of Chivalry and the Wreath of Valor quite a few times. Can you explain what those are?
So the Wreath of Valor is given out to the fighter in a crown tournament that has displayed prowess in probably the most significant way during the day. And then, and that's given by the king and queen, obviously. So they're the ones that make that decision. And then the Wreath of Chivalry is the person that they feel, once again, the king and queen, that they feel have best represented what they want to see out of behavior for the people fighting in the kingdom. It's often given to one of the unbelts because knights are just expected to be, holding themselves to that standard, and so it's very often given to unbelts. And I probably got maybe half of mine when I was an unbelt, I think.
Okay. What do you like about reigning that caused you to reign 2 more times after you got your ducal?
So being able to give out awards to people is pretty neat. I didn't specifically go into the tournaments that I won in order to be able to do this, but I have been super lucky to have been in the position where the rest of council has decided that certain people should be knighted that have been super close to me. So I was lucky enough, I got to knight my squire, Daniel of Aquitaine. I was king when council finally decided, it's not like it took forever, but when council decided that it was his turn, I was king and was able to do that. I've been able to knight 4 of my brothers in the Fellowship of the Argent Angel, which it sounds like it's a whole bunch of nepotism going on, but I promise you that this was just council. It ended up happening that way, and I was in the right place at the right time. So those things were pretty neat. One of the times I really wanted to focus on equestrian stuff, and I've been just super blessed. I imagine this is probably the case around all of the SCA, but here in the West Kingdom, the equestrian people are just so incredibly generous with their time and their resources. The horses that they've spent so much money on and towing things in their big expensive trailers with their big gas guzzling trucks, and they're so willing to share that. And so I got to reign one of the times, and we really focused on trying to do some shtick for promoting the West Ontier War, or Ontier West War, and we rode into court during the crown tournament that I held. We rode into court, and I had like arrows sticking out of my shield, and we pretended that who knows where the king was, and my queen just decided, well, I guess we're just going to start court. I have no idea where Alden is, and then we came riding into court and had people like cordoning off the public so that it would be safe. But I mean, I was literally out practicing like 3 nights a week for like 3 months to be able to make sure that I had the safety part of it down. I'd got to ride with the equestrian people before, but not enough to go right into court at a canter. And so being able to focus on that one of the times was really nice. But I've got some friends that really think that there need to be the crown, the experience of reigning should be spread around, and lots of people should try to get to do it. And that if you don't have kind of an interesting new idea, that you probably should let someone else take their turn. And so I've really tried to make sure that we try to offer something different every time we've reigned.
So do you have, or did you have sort of an idea of what you wanted to do each time that you won crown?
Well, I wouldn't say that I have an idea like for any specific crown. It's like, okay, I want to win October crown and I'm going to do this. But it's always more like, I would like to do this. And so let me fight and see if I can't win a crown. I mean, you hear the term like Super Duke, and then at least in our kingdom, you hear that. And I don't consider myself up to that like quality of fighter. I'm more at the quality of fight that any crown that I fight in, I could win, but I'm not the type of fighter that I enter a crown and everyone's like, oh, well, there's the victor, obviously. You know, we have a handful of fighters in our kingdom that's pretty much the case. And I never got to be that level of fighting. But so I can't say that, you know, pick a crown to win and with a goal in mind. It was more of a, well, let's try to win a crown sometime in the next year.
Okay.
And then, you know, try to do some ideas that you might have.
I think people would probably disagree that you're not a super duke, but that's okay. You don't have to think of yourself that way. But I understand what you're saying, because there are a handful of people in your kingdom that you pretty much know if they enter, they're going to win.
Yeah, if Jade enters a crown, he's going to win. I'm not going back a few years now since he doesn't seem to be playing as much, but you know, if Uther joins, he's going to win. And I think our current probably person would be, you know, Mark de Arundel, and you know, Havek, if he jumps in there, it's going to be a very likely thing. Or Connor Vysen or Fabian, and you know, there are a handful that I think are all probably a notch above me and have that better chance of doing it. That's why. I don't know. I'm a little bit down on the tier, I think.
Okay. But, I finally got to fight Connor last on Tier West War, and man, does that guy hit like a truck.
He's a powerhouse, and that's one of the reasons we brought him into our group this last year.
Oh, he's an Argent Angels too?
Yeah, he's our latest member. It's like, you know what? If that guy's gonna be hitting someone, let's have him hitting someone that's not us.
Yes.
That was to be joking, but I mean that was a fringe benefit.
Do you have other interests in the SCA besides fighting?
As I mentioned, the equestrian thing I really enjoy. With the car wreck and the spinal fusion that I had some years back, I don't feel that I probably should get on a horse. All my equestrian friends have their long list of injuries that they've gotten over the years, and the limited amount of riding, I've taken a few spills. And I think it's probably the risk reward ratio is not in my favor for doing that anymore. My neck is not as flexible, and if I fall off and land on my head, that probably would not be a good thing. I've tinkered around with making jewelry. I like doing silver jewelry. I just bought some more tools some more equipment to do that. So those are probably the things that are my biggest passion other than stick fighting.
Do you do like jewelry stamping or?
Stamp work, pierce work. I'm trying to get into casting, but when I say that, I don't think that I'm any kind of expert at this. I've made a handful of things, and it's just mostly for fun for myself. I consider myself. I think that in terms of making things, there are artists and there are craftsmen, and I might be working towards the low end of craftsmen. But I don't consider myself really an artist. That's not where my skills lie.
But I'm just interested in what you're interested in. So
yeah, those are what I enjoy doing.
Okay. So what do you think the Order of Chivalry does well as an order?
Order of Chivalry does well as an order. I don't know. I think that they're pretty good at least in our area of passing on fighting knowledge. I've heard kind of horror stories over the years, and I don't know if these are true or not, but I've heard stories of people being real almost stingy with their knowledge. You know, if you're not our household, we're not going to train you. If you don't, we're not going to teach you how to throw our fancy shots if you're not part of our group. And I don't think that happens very much around here. So at least in the West Kingdom, I think that the sharing of the knowledge of fighting is very, very good. I think that people try to be very good at communication. So for the most part, I think that the Order of Chivalry does a good job.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's really short-sighted not to share your knowledge, because, you know, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the order could do better?
I don't know. I don't have anything that's coming to mind right now. I think that that SCA wise, we could do better on local level in terms of generating more interest with the public. But that's probably the only real critique I have with the game. I think that we just need to be better at marketing ourselves.
Yeah. What's the coolest tradition in your kingdom?
Coolest tradition. I don't know. I've seen buffets done in different kingdoms, done in different ways. And I really think that the buffet that we do in the West Kingdom, and not that we're the only kingdom that does it, but a good solid slap to the face, I think is one of the most memorable parts of the knighthood ceremony. Having talked to knights that got really good buffets, I don't think I've ever talked to one that got, I mean, even all the way up to people that like lost consciousness for a moment, which I don't think we should be striving for. But even people that happened to, when you come around telling buffet stories, those people are standing so proud of the type of buffet that they got. And then I see people that got ones that weren't very hard for, anything from just personal preference to physical reasons that they can't be hit that hard. And I see them kind of hold themselves not quite as proudly when that happens. So I think that fighting wise, I think that that's probably one of our neatest traditions.
It is pretty cool. Yeah, I got my tooth broken. So
my squire that I knighted, I chipped his tooth when I knighted him.
Yeah. Duke, I got knighted by Duke Alden, and he's got some big hands. Anyway.
Yeah, Jade hit me, so I got a good one too.
Yeah, I've heard stories about Jade. Yeah. So why don't we look at your sword?
Okay.
So do you carve your handle?
I do carve my handle, but I carve it in kind of a simple, almost a rectangle with rounded edges. And that's just so that I can feel in my hand where the blade is. I have tried over the years all sorts of different like carved triggers into the handle, finger notches and stuff, and that just never really worked for me. I mean, they've been okay, but I find just this kind of simple rounded rectangle, it works very well for me.
And do you have a trigger in there, or do you use a lanyard?
I don't have a trigger, and I don't really have a lanyard. Duke Fabian, years and years ago, this is probably 25 years ago, he was fighting just with a leather
cool.
a leather demi-gauntlet, and he attached the leather demi-gauntlet to the basket hilt. And so when you put your hand in, if you
Right.
it doesn't just fly off. And so it acts as a lanyard, and it acts as your hand protection, so that you don't have to tie something over your hand protection or clip a lanyard on or something. So it's a pretty easy on and off. And I've fought with that for the last at least 25 years, maybe 30 years now.
That's super cool.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Is the basket hilt aluminum or stainless?
This one is stainless. I fought with a plastic basket for a really long time, but when I started fighting again last year after some time off, I decided I wanted to go to a metal basket hilt, and finally found this one. It's a stainless one that I got. Oh goodness, who are the people in Arizona that sell equipment? Anyway, Windrose. Yeah. So I bought this from Windrose. I had to wait a while because they didn't have any of the stainless in stock, but I really enjoy this one. It's not too heavy. I think it's probably comparable weight to the plastic basket hilts. And I went to those for a while because they're just so durable.
Right.
It seemed to last forever. I remember when I first started in the welded wire basket hilts, the tangs would break off all the time. So after having so many repairs going to the plastic ones, I loved those ones for a long time, but I like this one a lot too.
And how long is your sword?
I fought with 36 inches almost exclusively since I started sword fighting. My knight fought with a 36-inch sword when I started, and Sagan fought with a 36-inch sword when I started training with them. And so I figured if I was going to try to emulate what they were doing, using the same exact tool was my best shot at doing that. And then I've cut my sword down a little bit over the years and gotten a little tiny bit longer over the years, but 36 is just my bread and butter.
Do you have a thrusting tip?
I do. When thrusting tips came out, and this will kind of date myself because going back to when there were no thrusting tips except for the big giant like toothpick looking, or not toothpick, Q-tip looking ones that were just really not very functional. I didn't like them at that point. And then when the low profile thrusting tips came out, I didn't really care for them that much because we don't really have a historical model that we're following for tournaments, right? Where you try to beat someone and the last person standing gets to be the victor. But the closest thing with like the whalebone swords that they used to fight with, I think is the closest thing that we have to our tournaments that we try to make. And thrusting someone is a killing attack. And so fighting with a blunted weapon that beat someone into submission or unconsciousness or whatever, then I think you can say that there's something at least close to historical accuracy with that, or a historical parallel. But thrusting and still being friends afterwards, I don't think really works. And so that was not my preference. But once everybody started doing it, I started fighting with a thrusting tip just so that I could learn it, so that I could know how to defend against it. And so now if I match up with someone in a tournament that doesn't fight with a thrusting tip, I don't use my thrusting tip. And then if they have one, then I use it. So that's how I've kind of come to grips with that internally for myself.
Okay. So is there anything that we didn't cover about your fighting journey that you think you would like to tell us?
I don't think so. A lot of young fighters end up asking, how did you become accomplished? And I really think it's just fighting. I think that fighting once a week is maybe maintenance fighting. I think fighting twice a week, you can start to gain a little bit. And then any more that you can fight every week above twice a week is where you really start developing some skill. And then you got to balance that with wear and tear on your body. At 52 that I am right now, I couldn't fight 4 or 5 times a week because my muscles don't repair that quickly, but I could when I was 23. But I really I think that fighting, just time in armor and then getting some good training. You have to have direction for that time too. If you're practicing bad habits all the time, that's not going to help you. But if you can get a decent amount of guidance and then just a lot of time in armor, I don't see why anyone can't be good at this game.
Cool. All right. So I always end these interviews with 10 questions. There's actually 11 now because there's a bonus question. So we're just going to go rapid fire 10 questions. All right.
All right.
Number 1, if you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
Anyone in the world? I don't know. I haven't been playing for a while, and so I don't know who the big hot fighters are out there right now. I think that I can't think of her SCA name, but Claudia Linder.
Oh, Ava?
Yeah, there we go. Ava. I would love to fight her again. I got to fight her once when they were here in the States, her and her husband. I got to fight them once, and both of them beat me. And I would like to see where she is now. I think that's probably a fight that's stuck in my head for a long time. She's one of the best female fighters that I've ever encountered.
Yeah, she's a really interesting and neat person too.
Yeah.
I haven't fought her yet, but I think I would like to go to Australia next year and fight all of them down there because they're a really good bunch of people.
And I qualified that with she's one of the best female fighters that I've ever fought. I don't want that to be a negative thing. Like I said, she beat me that day, so I'm in no way at all putting her down or saying that the subcategory she's just good in. She's an amazing fighter.
Yeah, I didn't take it wrong.
Yeah.
Who would you like to see reign in your kingdom?
You know what? I'd like to see my knight reign again. I would love to see him be a duke. He has the skills to do it. He just is. He hasn't put his second day together yet. I think he's probably the one I would most like to see reign again, or to reign, period.
If you could talk fighting with anyone in the world for an hour, who would it be?
Does it have to be someone alive?
No, it can be, no.
And I mean, it would be wonderful to go back and talk to one of the historical figures and see how different what we're doing is from what they're doing. I mean, I know we've taken our sport to a much higher level than when I started fighting it, but it can't be anything at all like what they fought. And so I would love to be able to talk to someone that actually fought, when their life was on the line, or when their career, their finances and everything was on the line. If they were in the tourney circuit, it would be amazing to be able to go back and talk to someone and see what the real fighting that we pretend to do would have actually been like.
Yeah, that would be cool. What's your favorite medieval-esque or period movie?
We can go back further now, right? Because it's our time frame is open more with the SCA.
I don't believe that there is a start date on this.
I really like the, what do they call them, Sand and Sandals movies. Gladiator, I just love.
Yeah, that's a great movie. If you could add a rule to the rules of the lists, what would it be?
Can't think of anything right now.
Okay. What is your favorite tournament format?
Tournament format. You know what? I like the standard double elimination tournament. I think that's. I think that standard double elimination tournament where you get to pick whatever weapon you want, so that everyone is coming out with what they're very best at. I like that, but that's the kind of the West Kingdom norm. So I don't know if I'm just saying that because that's what I've experienced the most.
What's your favorite event?
Favorite event? Probably Estrella. I've been to Estrella a bunch of times. That was my first out of kingdom event that I ever traveled to, and there's a special set of memories and feelings that go back with that event.
If you could have any helmet in the world, regardless of cost, what kind would it be?
Well, I think I would get an Acer helmet. I love what Dave does. I bought one from him that was his personal helmet, and then I bought another one so it was a used helmet. Then I bought another one to fight in, and then I bought another one to fight in. So I think I own 3 of his hats, and I just love them.
He does.
I don't know. Yeah, he does just amazing stuff. And there's a lot of other talented artists out there I know that have come along that we just didn't have that option back when I first started fighting. But it'd probably be an early period Acer helm.
Okay. It's Saturday morning at Estrella, and several people want to talk to you about last night. What did you do?
What did I do? They're probably wondering where I was because I went to bed early because I was so tired, fighting.
Who is your favorite fight ever? Or what
favorite fight ever? You know, one of my favorite fighting moments was I went to a kite shield at one point to try to be a little more historically accurate, and I ended up I was trying to copy the Bayeux Tapestry look, and so I made a very large kite shield. I'd never fought with it before. I think I fought literally a fighter practice before I went to Grand Tournament. Figured that would be a pretty big handicap, and I ended up winning that tournament with it, partially because it was a large shield, and in retrospect, I wish I had not fought with such a large shield. It put me on a different side of a big shield size controversy that happened in the West Kingdom, at least for a while. But I fought Viscount Brand at one in maybe semifinals in that, and it was, in my mind at least, it was just an epic fight. There was one where I literally dove through the air and stabbed him in the body as I was flying through the air. As he hit me in the head and knocked me to the ground, we double killed. There was one where he threw a shot as I was spinning, and I did this like no look kind of block behind the back. I mean, it almost looked like the damn fight was choreographed. It was that's probably my most fond memory of fighting in a tournament. He's
pretty amazing. He's a guy you're like, why isn't that guy a Duke?
Yeah.
So, and the bonus question is, who is the cleanest fighter in your kingdom?
Cleanest fighter in our kingdom. Once again, I haven't been in armor much for the last half dozen years. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure who it is.
That's okay. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciated talking to you. I really appreciate your time and that you were willing to do this with some weird girl from Ontario and tell me all about your fighting story. So thank you very much.
I think we're all a bunch of weirdos from somewhere.
I guess so. Well, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.
Bye.